Before her death, Liu Si was on the brink of death and said, "Since I brought the game system across this world, just like 96% of gamers, I have been a good person in front of good people, a bad person in front of bad people, and talking nonsense to everyone. I have almost finished all the bad things. Dida, alright, I filled a bottle of medicine and almost recovered. As a villain, I have already passed away, and now I have been reborn. What I did before cannot be counted on my head anymore. The confession is over." After passing the time with a pile of nonsense, Liu Si ended her insincere confession, patted the dust off her body, and stood up with a lively expression. Keywords of the novel. Crossing a different world is really nothing to panic about, right? No pop-ups. Crossing a different world is really nothing to panic about, right? Download the complete set of TXT. Crossing a different world is really nothing to panic about, right? Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Hello. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Hello. The dark cave has no trace of light. Liu Si crawled on the ground, her eyes blind, her face sticky as if stained with blood, and her inner complaints never stopped from beginning to end. The matter still needs to be discussed 10 minutes ago. In the dimly lit room, she switched to a low-quality game with no shadows in order to pretend to be a master. The colors were flickering bright and dark. 1 second, she was frantically typing on the keyboard and fighting with the humanities. The next second, the bright light flickered and she arrived at this cave. She has traveled through time. As she traveled through time, she fell into a pile of dead people. The cold body arched her face with its limbs, and half-frozen blood clots fell into her hair. The fishy smell almost made her vomit. There's not even a trace of light here, it's really a great place. It seemed that footsteps could be faintly heard from a distance, and Liu Si sighed and barely crawled out of the pile of dead people. Anyway, she still had to accept reality early and stand still. The ground was damp and sticky, and she pressed her ears to the ground. Her heavy breathing became even louder, making it impossible for her to hear any information. In the blink of an eye, the sound of footsteps had already come to her. Dang. But with a loud bang, the sparks generated by the friction between the swords squeezed out a glimmer of light, illuminating the two faces ahead. Liu Si's eyes were suddenly pierced by light, and she wanted to look again, but the light had disappeared. The surroundings were once again shrouded in a hazy darkness, with no trace of those two people. Dida, the sound of water droplets echoed, and the smell of blood followed the darkness and made a comeback. Liu Si listened to the sticky sound of water flowing gently past her, followed by two dong-dong sounds of falling to the ground, and then there was a peaceful silence without any sound. 2 people came, 2 people collapsed. After waiting for a while, Liu Si made a judgment and boldly climbed forward. She touched a soft, fingerless round hand, with fresh blood sticking to it, and blood falling from her wrist. The pulse on the wrist is no longer beating. Is this one of them? Dead. Liu Si boldly followed his hand and groped down. The person seemed to be wearing a long robe with wide sleeves, and his body was covered in blood and a rusty smell. His clothes were completely soaked, and his chest was no longer breathing. More importantly, this person seems to have no bones all over his body, and wherever he touches, he feels soft and fluffy, with a terrifying touch. She frowned and turned back, ready to find another person, but suddenly saw a pair of red eyes. I saw a pair of bloodshot eyes staring at her, with blood flowing down like tears. It fell into mid-air and suddenly ignited into flames. In just an instant, the blood was completely burned. Before Liu Si could react, the blood fire and those eyes had already turned into flying debris and disappeared. What's all this? Did he use some kind of magic before his death to turn his own blood into flames? It's useless. Liu Si rubbed her eyes, which were irritated and uncomfortable by the sudden appearance of the flames. She groped forward, only to find a patch of dust and ash, and the air was filled with the unique stuffy smell of burning. This person has already vanished into ashes. Two dead people. The two people who were just carrying weapons and clashing into sparks fought inexplicably and miraculously to death. Why didn't they speak harshly to each other and tell her some information about this world before they died? Liu Si pursed her lips, but the sound of water droplets in her ears never stopped, instead becoming louder and louder. On this side. Who is talking? Liu Si was startled and looked forward. In the hazy darkness, there seemed to be a stone shining faintly. On this side. The white shimmer on the stone gently rippled, as if it had grown a layer of fine fur, greeting Liu Si. The water droplets turned into flowing water, rhythmically accompanied by the strange light on the stones, making Liu Si feel like she was at the bottom of the water for an instant. She could feel that the corpses and dust around her seemed to be swaying gently with the rhythm of the halo. Are these flying ash corpses actually the result of the light on the stones? On this side, dear friend, come on this side. The stone whispered softly to Liu Si. She had goosebumps all over her body, but the light on the stone seemed to catch her eyes, capture her soul, and make her involuntarily want to climb towards that direction. However, her body was completely out of control of her brain and suddenly stopped. No, the things haven't been searched yet. Liu Si only glanced at the sneaky stone, and her body's instincts completely surpassed this mysterious atmosphere. Instead, she used the light to scrutinize the bodies of the two deceased, hoping to find some treasures from them. After all, she traveled through the game. Although she didn't play a single-player game just now, her behavior still needs to be closer to all the smart and money-saving protagonists. No. Dong. Suddenly, a soft sound exploded in my ear, as if a waterfall had suddenly fallen, and a fierce water column collided with the ground. Before Liu Si could reach out her hand to explore the treasure, she felt a spinning sensation as if the stone had gone crazy and suddenly burst into a bright light, in an instant. I saw the gray fly coalescing with flesh and blood, and the light turned into water light. The stone screamed angrily, but couldn't stop everything from flowing back. The flames flew up, blood and tears burned, and a spark floated in the air, swaying and illuminating both faces. Is time going back? Liu Si felt dizzy and heavy, as if she could still feel the bloody touch on her hands and smell the smell of burning blood in her nose. However, the two corpses stood up again and walked back to their original positions to start fighting. No, 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 who are you? The stone was still howling loudly, but it completely prevented the light from coming out. The scattered arc of light expanded into a mirror-like lake, falling from mid-air to the ground, shaking out a splash of water. Wow! The stone completely shattered, the lake quickly swallowed the fragments, and the cave walls quickly grew sparkling plants. Everything only happens in an instant, everything has changed. The limbs of the dead continued to arch her head, and the half-frozen blood clots of the dead still fell on her body. Liu Si was just a stirring spirit, and then returned to the pile of dead people. What happened? She shook her head and struggled to climb out of the shackles of the dead body's limbs, stumbling and crawling to the ground. The calm lake water moved forward and lay flat in front of her, illuminating a strange face. The translucent strips on the top are different in length, with small characters like nose, eyes, and face shape written on them. Liu Si shook his eyes, and the strips moved. The cheekbones in the lake suddenly protrude, as if two big mantu were stuffed. This is like a face-pinching system. The stone is gone, and the two resurrected corpses from before also disappear. There is an inexplicable underground lake on the ground, and she has a system. Don't leave, take your life. Before Liu Si could even ponder a few more, she heard a scolding sound and two figures flashed beside her, but two new faces. It's really interesting, things have all come together, right? Liu Si looked at the lake and the figures not far away, hesitating about what to do first. Who would have thought of a rustling sound coming from above, a few small stones rolling down, and the top of the cave suddenly cracked a few cracks, as if a big stone was about to fall. There's no need to think about which is lighter or heavier now. Liu Si glanced at the lake water, quickly flipped over to the next item, added a few points, took a deep breath, and suddenly rolled to the side, boom. But as smoke shrouded and boulders fell, amidst the grey dust, only 3 surprised and embarrassed faces were visible. Liu Si looked at her 2 strangers with dementia on her face, thought for a moment, and then smiled and said hello. Hello everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Arguments. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Arguments. With your words and mine, the 2 new friends ignored Liu Si's polite greeting and started arguing with each other. Killing for pleasure, eating human flesh, and what else would you dare not do if you lost your copper sect? Today, when I met you, it was your time to die. A person who eats vegetarian food every day, also deserves to speak loudly in the Fatian cave. Children, wake up, this place is so dangerous, it's not where you should stay. You. Liu Si remained speechless on the side, watching them arguing and arguing. One pulled out a long sword, the other swung out a cloth, and sparks and frost suddenly flashed from her body. Surprisingly, she started a fight. Schwa, but when she heard a strange noise brushing against her ear, Liu Si turned her head alertly and saw a large piece of ice debris falling heavily on the ground. The sharp top collided with the bottom of the cave and turned into a puddle of rotten water, which startled her for a moment. A beam of sparks followed closely and was gently blown away by the cold wind, landing on the ice residue. The fire and ice licked and melted together, suddenly exploding into a milky white glow, rolling out a bead from inside. Gulu, the ice residue and sparks dissipated, leaving only this bead in place. Liu Si just blinked, and the bead rolled smoothly to her hand, blended stone description. In memory of the 2 masters who fought here thousands of years ago, Fatian Cave decided to produce something that seemed useless whenever cold water and hot water collided inside the cave. Valuation. 20 Lingsher. Liu Si picked up the bead and a string of characters automatically appeared in front of her. She shook her head left and right, and the characters even changed colors automatically to match the scene in front of her. It seems that this is also part of her system. It's quite convenient. Liu Si's eyes sparkled with a strange light, hiding the beads in her palm. But as one of the 2, who were immersed in the fight, finally realized that there was another Liu Si sitting on the side, panting heavily, suddenly calling out to her. Miss, this girl. Liu Si raised her head and cursed at each other in front of these 2 people. The person speaking should be a righteous person, wearing a robe full of immortal aura, holding a sword in her hand, with small sparks floating on the sword body. Miss, stay away. He threw a dagger at Liu Si and said, I'm going to use my move. If there's anything wrong, take this dagger and run for your life, even though you. The villainous elder sister across the street sneered and said, even halfway through the fight, do you dare to distract yourself and pretend to be a good person? The good guy gritted his teeth, his long sword flickering with sparks as he danced around his body. As long as you die. Bang. Before he could finish speaking, he heard a loud earthquake in the cave, the walls buzzing and moving, and small stones rolling down to the ground. The hole is shaking. The 3 of them were all startled by the protruding situation. After the boulder fell just now, there was no further movement in the cave. They all thought the situation had temporarily stabilized, but to their surprise, the cave was shaking even more violently than before. Liu Si twisted her knees towards the ground, rolling and avoiding a fist-sized stone, but happened to come behind the giant stone that had fallen before. Susu susu, there was a strange sound buzzing quietly under the cover of the roaring sound inside the cave. Liu Si tightly held the dagger and stared intently at the giant rock that was constantly emitting slight vibrations, but seeing the deep cracks on the giant stone, with a dark red light emanating from inside, like silk woven with blood, fluttering outwards and cutting open the stone body, it reappears in the world. Ice and fire intertwined, the light of weapons flickered, and stones stood sideways. Everything seemed so familiar. Girl. The urgent call from the righteous elder brother suddenly came, and Liu Si raised her head. While observing the boulder, the two of them simply gave up on themselves and had abandoned all their fighting skills, entangled in a primitive fight. But as the blazing sword pierced through the chest of the cultist, the dark blue cloth had already tightly wrapped around the neck of the righteous disciple, twisted into a knot. A righteous disciple has prominent eyes and a tongue exposed. The cultist seemed to have raised his head, wanting to get up, but still lacked strength, and his chest penetrated completely through the sword. The righteous disciple struggled and took a final glance in the direction of Liu Si, saying, "Kill her." Boom! Another wave of gravel is falling, and the hole is about to collapse at any moment. Liu Si held the dagger given by the righteous disciple with his back hand, passed by the corpses of the two, and followed the plants climbing on the cave wall, shimmering with green light, groping for the path to the outside of the cave. The eyes of the cultist seemed to be suspended, strangely swinging towards Liu Si, as if they were looking at her, and then quickly lost their strength and fell back to their original position. The rain of crushed stones fell, and a dust and ash wind stirred up in the cave. Liu Si walked back behind the dust and suddenly turned around, waving his arm downwards. The dagger blade fluently pierced through the heart of the cult and opened a second blood hole in its body. Shit! She used all her strength with this dagger, hoping to directly pierce through the heart of the cult. A red little scorpion quickly darted away from under the cult disciple and crawled towards the edge of the hole in the dark, shining corner. Liu Si's dagger, however, was faster. The tip of the dagger lightly penetrated the joint gap of the scorpion, and he pressed down his wrist hard, cutting off the scorpion's head crisply. Ah! The cult disciple spat out a mouthful of black blood, completely silent. Liu Si forcefully drew out the dagger and said, "I knew you didn't die completely, but luckily you made up for it. Brother, I have avenged you. If this person hasn't died completely, and if she walks halfway out of the cave, give her a chance, that would be great." A strange electronic special effects sound system started, and a string of small characters appeared in Liu Si's eyes. Gain experience points upgrade is it this type of system originally? Liu Si looked towards the lake, thinking whether to take advantage of the good condition in the cave and time, and quickly go and pinch his face again. Suddenly. Who? But there was another strange noise coming from the side, as if something was hidden in an invisible corner, crawling silently against the gravel. Liu Si turned around and saw the black blood gushing out of the cultist's body flowing down the bumpy ground to the lake, converging in front of the boulder that had fallen from the cave roof before. The bottom of the boulder seemed to have absorbed blood and had become transparent and dark red. Liu Si was about to reach out to check the information, but heard a click sound. Deep cracks appeared on the surface of the stone, and it shook gently, as if it was about to split from the middle. Bang! The hole shook suddenly and the stone shattered completely. Countless small stone fragments suddenly shrouded in the air, and the originally faint smell of blood became somewhat suffocating. It looks a bit like the charred debris flowing from those teary eyes that burst open. Liu Si waved her hand and dispersed the dust before her eyes. She saw that the original giant stone had completely disappeared, and there was only an unknown metal ingot on the ground, which looked dark and smooth on the surface. Without any further movement, Liu Si simply reached out and picked up the metal ingot. Unknown metal ingot block, description. Unknown valuation. Unknown. Leaving aside this metal ingot for now, when I picked it up and looked at the system panel, did the bullet time enter outside? Liu Xian watched a small stone floating and swaying above her head, as if leisurely strolling in the park. After half a day, it only fell half a centimeter without passing by. Now there's a way to pinch your face, check the system, and pick up things. As soon as Liu Si left, her heart became decadent and she was simply overjoyed. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Collapse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Collapse. The sparkling green light nestled against the frozen ripples on the lake, casting a strange and unpredictable face. Above, there was a slow rain of stones about to fall. Liu Si quickly turned over and came to the lake, ready to pinch her face again. After a while, her chin was sharper than a knife, and after a while, the rain of stones fell again, but her forehead suddenly swelled up. In a fit of urgency, she finally managed to create a face that was 6 or 7 points similar to herself. Ah, that's it. With a few thugs, the rain of stones fell. Liu Si quickly withdrew from the lake. She lifted the package and prepared to run towards the only exit direction in front of her. She touched the hands of 2 warm corpses on the ground. Name: Qin Fei, level 8, status. Death, name: Qi Jiao, level 8, status. Death sect, age, belonging items, and the most critical possession items. The information provided by the system is comprehensive, and as soon as the body is touched, a panel will burst out in front of you. This is like having an auxiliary observation system built in for her, which can quickly identify and display information and intelligence from others. Unfortunately, there is no information such as abilities, skills, or attributes in the panel, which makes it a bit difficult to use during fights. Why doesn't it feel so good? Liu Si sighed and mourned as she walked. In fact, she wants an artificial intellectual disability that belongs exclusively to her, so she can come out and remind her where there are problems and dangers. She couldn't click on the words on the panel information, so she still had to exit the panel to find the items. She simply pulled the cloth from the body of the cult believer Qi Jiao and used it as a wrapping cloth. With a big knife and axe, she swept the things that were fastened on their belts and the metal ingot into the cloth, tying a knot and carrying it on her body. She opened the panel that appeared before her after pinching her face. Name: Liu Si, level 2, status. Normal health of properties: strength 0, agility 2, intelligence 0, perception 1, endurance 0, luck 1, charm 6. Retention point 1. Special skill. Hold point 2, ability. None. The interface in front of me is like smart glasses in science fiction games, capable of freely adjusting the UI. Call up and move freely, change and adjust the interface color without obstructing the line of sight. Why don't you give me some kind of Dida kid or Hua Hua kid to show off, but that's better than convenience, right? She probably didn't cross over into the game, but rather had a built-in gaming system. Liu Si opened her attribute panel, entered the bullet time, and coordinated the optimal route to avoid the gravel above her head, but her eyes were always uncontrollably drifting towards her attribute values. Strength 0, agility 2, intelligence 0, perception 1, endurance 0, luck 1, charm 6, intelligence 0, intelligence 0, intelligence 0. It's really great. A quite classic attribute system. Liu Si couldn't help but grind her teeth in a strange way. The attribute points she added in a hurry are actually quite decent, at least with high charm, which is in line with her usual game habit of persuasion, verbal attacks, and threats. That's great. I'm an idiot with 0 intelligence right now. Unfortunately, I've had too little luck added. A string of stones narrowly brushed against her head and fell, causing Liu Si to carefully pass through the cave. The ground seemed to be covered in dense white bones, which had become soft and fragile after years of corrosion. This place is further away from the water, and the air doesn't seem so dull. There is a dry wind blowing from the front, but it brings a strange grey mold smell. Liu Si suddenly felt a pain in her toes. With the light of the plants on the cave wall, she looked down and saw a grey-white skeleton holding a long bough, leaning against the edge of the cave wall. Name: Guzong, status. Death, sect. Shanshui sect. According to the information, the previous upright elder brother Qin Fei was also a member of this Shanshui sect. Therefore, this skeleton is very likely to be Qin Fei's predecessor who came to explore caves and adventure in the early years, but now it has rotted into a white bone. Liu Si drew out his long bow and said, "It's too late to search for the small ones. Take these big ones with you." She forcefully stuffed the long bow into the package. Scratching everything is her habit engraved in DNA. The plants on the cave wall emitted a murky and shimmering light, and Liu Si carefully searched for objects on the ground while paying attention to standing firmly inside the shaking cave. She dug out a big sword from the ground, found several scattered books from the tattered bag, and found 3 pieces of silver in the corner with sharp eyes. The package on my back gradually grew larger. The wind grew stronger, and the musty smell gradually faded away, replaced by a fresh scent of grass and wood, drifting in. Liu Si couldn't help but feel a little excited. She quickened her pace and took 2 turns. The mysterious Fatian cave, which was full of strange things, did not continue to surprise her. Along the way, there was nothing but a corpse, and she arrived at the last small cave in front of the cave entrance. A faint light emerged from the corner in front of the cave, where her search ability reached its peak. She even found a living girl lying in a prominent position in the center of the cave. Name: Zhuming medicine, holding items. Clothing: ordinary cloth clothes, weapon. Refined steel sword, medicinal food. Pure vegetarian dry food, miscellaneous. Silver 3, rough pen map 1, father's letter 1, what a poor person he is. Liu Si glanced roughly at the possession of the girl named Zhuming medicine and couldn't help but shake her head. She looked at the hazy eyes of the various life medicines that were half open. There is really no profit to gain from killing this person. It's better to wake her up and let her introduce herself to the world background, introduce things in the world, and be a guide. Dong dong dong, the whole hole was shaking violently, and a deadly vibration struck Liu Si's ear like a drum. Liu Si made sure to pay attention, holding onto the various life medicines with one hand and her large package with the other, dragging her towards the entrance of the cave. Bang! But with a loud bang, a stone half the size of a person's head flew out from the cracked walls of the cave, causing even more severe vibrations and causing the stones to pour down. Wave after wave, the flying stones seemed to be rolling endlessly. The hole is about to collapse. Liu Si kept pulling out the panel, judging the order in which the stones fell, and crossed the walking path in her mind. The sharp stone on the ground dragged out a long blood hole on the back of the various life medicines, causing her to suddenly wake up. She looked at Liu Si in surprise, stumbled along with her instincts, but could not fully react to what had happened. Bang! 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 Just one sound after another, as if explosives were exploding behind her, huge pieces of broken stones sank down from behind Liu Si. Liu Si kept opening the panel to summon bullets and adjust their movements. The cave was already stirred to a pitch black, with dust and ash choking and uncomfortable. But Liu Si and the various life medicines did not suffer any injuries from beginning to end. In the eyes of the various life medicines, those stones seem to have spiritual intelligence and only fall after they have passed by. She struggled to hand the map from her sleeve bag to Liu Si, who glanced at her and nodded at her. The bright light from the exit waved in front of them, and Liu Si suddenly jumped forward. With a loud bang, the Fatian cave collapsed the moment they came out. Bang! Long! The sunshine did not directly warm their bodies as imagined, and dust and ashes kept swirling before their eyes, reminding them of their good luck. The Fatian cave is completely unrecognizable, like a vortex stirring sand, stones, and soil, turning downwards. Liu Si looked at the large pit of Fatian cave ruins that suddenly sank in front of her toes and exhaled, "Are you awake? Are you awake? Wake up. We need to walk back again. It feels like it's still going to collapse here, it's not very safe. It's better to wake up." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Special Skills. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Special Skills. On a clear day hanging high, the mountains were shrouded in a thick layer of smoke, and the dust rolled up after the cave collapsed, engulfing half of the sun. Liu Si fell into a hazy haze. There is a path under my feet, I don't know where to go. The girl dragged out of the hole still half opened her eyes, without any signs of regaining her sanity, appearing to be out of crisis, and her sudden burst of strength dissipated with it. Liu Si dragged her for a while, estimating that she should have reached a safe distance before stopping under a big tree. Name: Liu Si. Special skill, retention point 2. After leaving the hole, Liu Si had the opportunity to carefully read these words. She clicked on a special skill and casually pulled down, but the more she looked, the more annoyed she became. Divine soul pouring. Requirement: Charm 100. Everyone will involuntarily nod and agree to you as soon as they hear you speak. Persuasion success rate plus 75%, what you say will make people dizzy like a drug. Don't think too much, this is not cursing you for speaking too long and making people drowsy. It's really not. Admired by thousands of people. Requirements: Intelligence 50, Charm 50, Strength 50. Wherever you go, there will be your fans present. Their crazy pursuit will certainly bring you benefits. Is there a downside? That should be a bit, right? I hope they don't have the habit of carrying weapons with them. Take care. Limp and bad brain. Requirement: Agility minus 20, Intelligence minus 15. Stupid and foolish, how can you continue to live in this cruel world? These 15 lucky items are added to you, hoping to make up for your stupidity a bit. My friend, what should you do? My intelligence can still be negative. It seems that I'm not bad yet, haha. Liu Si flipped the skill list back up, as she only had the initial attribute points, there were not many skills to choose from. She didn't hesitate to choose a skill that could directly reflect the obtained map in front of her. She flipped through a few more casually. Heartbreak Killer. Requirement: Charm 6. I heard that handsome men and beautiful women are all natural killers, and that's absolutely true. The person who sees you will really have their heart popping out and shattering all over the ground. The experience gained from killing plus 15%, you are truly ruthless. That's it, I'm too lazy to read. Liu Si squinted her eyes and chose this skill. The two skills had depleted their retention points. She then flipped to the attributes column and added a little bit of luck, praying that it would be useful. She unfolded the package and sorted out her things, only to find a tattered women's cloth garment that had somehow been wrapped up in the package. Liu Si suddenly noticed that she was only wearing a layer of middle clothes, so she quickly changed the cloth clothes on. Make do with it, sigh. She opened the pure vegetarian dry food she found from Qin Fei, took a bite, and coughed incessantly. She had never eaten such an unpleasant food before, and she didn't know how people like Shanshui's sect successfully swallowed it. Zhuming Medicine let out an uncomfortable groan and flipped over. Liu Si looked at her curiously, reached out and shook his hand in front of her, and simply searched for the small bag tied to his clothes. Good daughter, everything is going well in the village. You don't have to worry. Your mother and I are still looking for your brother, but there hasn't been much progress. Your sister Law told me that she's dreaming about your brother more times now, which seems like a good thing. Anyway, we're okay with this. You take care of everything yourself. It seems like this is also a person with a story. Liu Si casually put the letter back into the bag and looked at the map that had been handed to her before the various life medicines. The map lines are thick and simple, with a circle drawn where Liu Si woke up, with the three characters Shashan Lake written in the middle. The front passage leads directly to the small cave where the various life medicines were discovered, and further on, the cave exits. The areas that were not covered by the simple brush lines seemed to be part of the cave, but they were not fully explored. They were only covered in shadows, with the word death scribbled on the side. On the back of the map, there are also abbreviated characters. Senior Sister Shui, there has been an abnormal occurrence in Feitian Cave, and the technique has been improved. My sword is not a match for the same cultivation-level alchemist inside. I need you and senior brother Qin Fei to come. Be careful. Also, senior brother Lon may come back, be prepared to be on guard inside the door. Life medicine remains, no wonder Qin Fei and Qi Jiao fought so hard in the cave before. They seemed to have average strength, but were forcibly strengthened in the cave. So, back and forth, it seemed like the moves were very powerful, but in fact, there were only 2 moves. Liu Si hesitated and put the map back into the pockets of various life medicines. She wanted to find some medicine to feed the various life medicines, but unfortunately, she only seemed to have some dry food on her body. In her package, there were only 2 bottles of pills called black meat pills, which sounded disgusting. They should have been something she felt from the body of the lost copper zone Qijiao, and she didn't dare to eat them at all. There were only 3 scattered and broken books left. Liu Si glanced at them casually, but couldn't see anything useful. There was no record of medical skills on them, and now the sky was covered in dust halfway, and her vision was obstructed, so she couldn't concentrate on reading. Wow, the wind stirred up a corner of the dust, and there seemed to be something piled up in front of it. Liu Si squinted her eyes and looked forward along the tiny sunlight squeezed in, only to see a few gray-white leg bones with meat crumbs. There seems to be something over there, go find it. Maybe you can find some medicine, silver, and weapons. Liu Si gritted her mind and grabbed the dagger as she walked forward. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Encountering Good People. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Encountering Good People. The wind is blowing, but the green grass and tall trees on both sides of the road are deeply immersed in gray and white dust. Looking up, only some hazy shadows can be seen. Liu Si walked among the piles of white bones, carrying a package on his back. After walking for a while, Liu Si didn't find anything. She reached out and picked up an ingot of silver, but unexpectedly encountered a mysterious metal ingot that had burst out of the previous stone. This thing is so mysterious, I don't know if it's a cheat for me. As a novice player of Brahmin games, a quantum speed reader of online novels, and the owner of the Golden Finger cheat, Liu Si can immediately announce that this metal ingot is definitely something good, perhaps a heavenly and earthly treasure, and will definitely come in handy in the future. The metal ingot is not heavy to pick up, as if it doesn't have much weight, feels neither hot nor cold to the touch, and has no special feeling. Liu Si touched the metal ingot and suddenly regained consciousness. It turned out that the white bones on both sides were piling up more and more, and in the end, they seemed to pile up into a small mountain of bones, domineeringly crossing the middle of the road. This looks similar to the pile of dead people that Liu Si was trapped in when he crossed over. The skull and bones here have completely scattered, making it impossible to distinguish who is who. It seems that there are still 2 corpses with intact bodies buried inside. Is it so terrifying? Liu Si struggled to pull out the large bones one by one from the pile of skeletons, finally touching the hand leaning against the fresh corpse. Name: Wang Danqian, level 15, status comatose, life in danger, camp. Lost copper sect. It turns out to be a living person. Liu Si raised her eyebrows and opened the person's item list. The contents inside were actually quite abundant, with 10 spirit stones, a spell book, a short sword with suggestions for 3 agile assembly points, and a set of agility-enhancing equipment on her body. Liu Si stared fixedly at Wang Danqian, her originally dark eyes appearing eerie in the gray mist. She simply threw away a few skeleton bones and grabbed the short sword handle on Wang Danqian's belt. Wang Danqian was also opening his eyes at this moment, struggling to turn his head and look at her through the dense white bones. What kind of person are you? With a loud explosion, Wang Danqian suddenly struggled inside the skeleton, but he was already too deep. The more he moved, the more the long and thin bones crossed his legs, like a vortex made of bones, devouring him downwards. Shine. Liu Si pulled out her short sword directly, but saw the white sword light flickering. She wanted to flip her wrist downwards and stab Wang's faint waist, but it seemed completely pointless. The sword was clumsily stuck at the edge of her belt, and even almost twisted her wrist. It's really annoying, it seems like I can't use this short sword fluently right now. Liu Si was not angry either, her gaze flickering as she looked at Wang Danqian in a waist-tied and strong outfit. But with a click, Wang Danqian suddenly broke free from the bone that was gripping her leg, and his calf suddenly moved upwards into mid-air, teasing her head. Where are you from, wearing strange clothes and dragging such a big package, trying to steal my short sword? Are you from the Shanshui sect? Wang Danqian roared loudly as he spoke. Liu Si quickly jumped back, avoiding Wang Danqian's leg wind. Wang Danqian's move didn't work, so he immediately changed his approach and pushed his knees inward. He used his waist strength to retract his legs, with his toes pointing down a bit. His upper body rushed up and broke through the bone shackles, standing up. I warn you, all the skeletons here were made by my head, including your boss. 1 second he was still alive, and the next second he turned into bones. Aren't you afraid? It turns out that these skeletons were not naturally corroded, but were created by evil martial artists. They are truly bloody. Wang Danqian was panting heavily, as if he had been injured somewhere, looking at Liu Si with a twisted expression on his face. He pointed gloomily at the short sword in Liu Si's hand and said, "Give it back to me, I'll give you a good one." Sigh, sigh. Suddenly, Wang's faint words were infinitely prolonged, and his voice seemed to have changed, very ridiculous. The expression on his cheek also became even more terrifying due to the strange shaking of his muscles. Liu Si opened her attribute panel and found that outside the cave, she could still enter bullet time. Although it's not completely paused like a game, it's still good. Liu Si wanted to take advantage of the time to walk up to Wang Danqian, but just like in a cave, her own movements would also become slower during the bullet time, and she was also restricted. Just as I thought, Liu Si snorted in her heart and closed the panel. Ah, fast. Wang Danqian finally finished speaking, completely unaware of what had just happened. Liu Si's eyes rolled and she slowly walked towards Wang Danqian, holding her short sword flat in both hands. She said sadly, "I'm not from the Shanshui sect. Senior, please don't accuse me. I'm not interested in vegetarianism." Wang Danqian didn't know if he had calmed down a bit, or if he was influenced by Liu Si's charm. He hesitated and looked at Liu Si, but with a hint of doubt, he said, "Stop, you just stand there for now. You said you're not from the Shanshui sect, so who are you? The younger generation who came this time is definitely not someone dressed as serious as you. You're definitely not from our sect. How can I return the sword to you if I don't come over?" Liu Si was speechless and had a game system as a cheat, so she naturally spoke according to the game routine. "I was knocked unconscious by the beating, and when I woke up, the hole began to vibrate, which scared me to run out quickly. Just now, I saw you in a pile of skeletons, and I didn't know if you were alive or dead, so I bravely came over to try to catch you out. I didn't expect you to wake up straight away. I was startled and instinctively pulled out my short sword. Is there any problem? Since you are playing the villain, naturally speak harshly." Wang Danqian's face was eerie as he said, "What does cave vibration mean?" Liu Si quickly approached him, adding oil and fire, and his voice was full of emotion. "The whole cave shook like the ground, I couldn't stand, and then the whole cave collapsed like this." She held the hilt of her short sword with one hand and pretended to send it towards Wang Danqian, but with the other hand she had quietly grasped her dagger, observing the shape of the skull pile below in the corner of her eyes, and jumped over suddenly. "Senior, your short sword." Liu Si's legs suddenly stepped onto the pile of white bones, causing the previously barely balanced skeletons to immediately scatter and remix, causing Wang Danqian's lower body to be stuck in a wrong position. Wow. Wang Danqian's thoughts were forcibly interrupted by the commotion, and he quickly turned his head in surprise, looking at Liu Si with a surprised expression on his face. The surprise on Liu Si's face was even heavier than his, as she lowered her feet and tried to hook towards another person below who looked physically intact, while screaming in agony. "Oh, I fell." She casually threw the short sword into the gap between the bones, and Wang Danqian's gaze instinctively followed the sword. At the same time, her foot also touched the head of the corpses below. In an instant, the short sword pierced through the gap between the white bones, and Wang Danqian's muscles moved. His hair swayed back slightly, seeming to be hesitating. A string of words overshadowed Wang Danqian's expression and directly imprinted it in front of Liu Si's eyes: name. LV San, status. Death, belonging to Shanshui sect. That's no problem. Pretending to kill this cannibalistic cult doesn't matter what he had on him, but it's a rare opportunity. It's considered a high-level killing, and he should have a lot of experience. Between lightning and fire, Liu Si had already made a decision. She carefully observed the text behind the panel for a while, her mind focused and calmed down. Suddenly, she folded up the panel and lowered her body. Squeak. But upon hearing the sound of the wind, Wang Danqian instantly made the decision to subdue Liu Si first. Suddenly, he tilted his body and rushed towards Liu Si. His two pale calves and shins were like explosion-proof forks, supporting his lower body, causing him to suddenly lose balance and tilt his waist to the side. The information about Faetian Cave reported by Liu Si filled his mind, causing him to forget that he was still trapped in Hulun for a moment. As Wang Danqian's head was about to collide with an intact spine, he finally realized what had happened and was about to twist his waist to stop his decline. Suddenly, a glimmer of white light flashed in front of him, quickly spreading back into blood. Puzzle. Blood splattering. Liu Si had already bent down to pad his knife and waited here. She only needed to gently raise her wrist, and the blade of the dagger could smoothly cut through Wang Danqian's flesh. However, due to unfamiliarity, she couldn't find the right position, and the first cut only separated Wang Danqian's eyelids. Sorry about that. Liu Si was also somewhat speechless about her own skills. She didn't listen to Wang's faint answer and directly opened her own panel. She roughly estimated the position relationship in her heart for a while before returning to the normal time flow. As she had rehearsed in her heart, she lightly lowered her arm and the blade of the dagger seemed to be stuck on her smooth skin. Said Wang Danqian faintly once again, bullet time. Liu Si didn't want to hear him talk much at all. He just opened the panel and looked at the direction of the dagger, saying, this time it's right, it's under his throat. The front is unfamiliar, so we need to make more adjustments. Shit. Blood instantly soaked white bones. The two eyes of a skull were hollow and dark, as if mocking Wang Danqian's lifeless flesh and blood. With a backward pull of the blade, Wang Dan's blood sprayed lightly, and his body sank into the pile of white bones, completely lifeless. Pudong, Liu Si exhaled and smiled brightly at the skull. I'm exhausted. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Experts should leave some. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Experts should leave some. Do. Wang Danqian's body had just collapsed and the prompt sound rang 3 times in a row. Liu Si opened the panel and found that she had been promoted 3 levels in a row. Gain experience, rise to level 5. Gain attribute points 3, and special skill points 1. Special skill points should not be given every time you level up. Liu Si muttered with some dissatisfaction, Wang Danqian has a full level 15. How did I gain so much experience by killing him? It seems that he was already injured, so he didn't give me a big head. He only gave me the experience of the last hit and assist. A master should be able to adapt to changing circumstances. She decided to keep these 3 attribute points and 1 skill point for now, and then carefully study and explore in a safe place before adding them. A bright red and fishy blood flowed down from the edge of the white bone pile. The blood that had been running in Wang Danxian's veins a while ago was now dirty and dripping onto the ground, wetting Liu Si's large package. She let out a whoosh and struggled out of the pile of bones, picking up the package with disdain. We need to cover it with a piece of cloth outside, otherwise it would be too conspicuous to carry it out. As she was unpacking, the dark metal ingot suddenly slipped out, brushed against the back of her hand, and fell to the ground. Liu Si's movements stopped immediately, and suddenly had a sudden inspiration. She picked up the metal ingot and placed it in a pool of blood on the ground beside her. Wow! But a strange sound spread from the metal ingot, and the surface of the ingot suddenly burst into a faint dark red light. The halo was like a cloud, entangled around the ingot, but suddenly gathered inward, as if it had turned into heavy droplets, sticking to the metal surface. Shit! Liu Si looked carefully and saw that the surface of the metal ingot seemed to have some strange pattern floating out, bending and twisting, very eerie. Good thing. Liu Si curiously took the metal ingot back in her hand. She gently shook the ingot and found no change in weight. It seemed that the blood that had been consumed by the ingot had been completely digested by the ingot. Besides not knowing what's useful, you're quite useful. After killing someone, I don't have to look for a mop everywhere, hee. Just like before by the lake, the blood was sucked clean without leaving a drop. Liu Si threw the metal ingot back into the package without further research. Turning to the idea of Wang Danxian and the corpse beneath him. Name: Wang Danxian, level 15. Holding items. Clothing: refined soft armor, strength clothes, weapon. None medicinal and food. Black meat pill 10 miscellaneous. Linkshare 4, spell book 1. The short sword was at Liu Si's disposal, so it was not counted towards Wang Qianqian. Liu Si looked at this interface and once again expressed her silence. If there were more items in the future, finding things would be much more chaotic. She struggled to pry Wang Danxian, who had become even heavier after her death, out of the pile of bones. During this time, she accidentally bumped into countless bones, but the panel did not wander in front of her. It should be only what she wanted to see that the information would actively pop out. The spirit stone was hidden in Wang Danxian's sleeve pocket, with a diameter similar to that of Liu Si's original World 1 Yuan coin, emitting a subtle light, crystal clear. Liu Si touched it, but it didn't feel anything special. There was no sense of spiritual power rushing through the body, nor was there a feeling of overall patency. From the item information on the panel, it appears that the spirit stone can be used as a trading currency, and it is also unclear what other uses it can have. She took off the clothes from Wang Danxian's body and put them on again. It looks like the workmanship of this garment is really good, it can fit different body types. After putting it on, Liu Si indeed felt much more relaxed in her body, and her hands and feet became more flexible. Shwa! But upon hearing the sound of the split wind in mid-air, the sword body flew diagonally and danced wildly. The clothes added a touch of agility, and Liu Si couldn't wait to try the short sword. But when she suddenly flipped her wrist and skillfully hooked it downwards, the tip of her sword pierced straight through the narrow gap formed by the interweaving of 2 white bones below and plunged deeply into the ground. I almost twisted my wrist just now, but now I can do it so badly. Liu Si nodded to herself with satisfaction and withdrew the short sword from its sheath. Then he hid the spirit stone in the dark bag as usual, and casually stuffed the spell book and black meat pill into the package. For Liu Si, the things on the body of the Shanshui patriarch named LV San are not as good as those on Wang Qianqian. Although he also has 3 spirit stones, a spell book, and 2 bags of dry food, besides that, clothes and weapons are recommended for people with an intelligence of 3 to equip, and Liu Si's equipment is also of little use. The package has become bigger again, it's great. She walked back to the bottom of the big tree, and the various life medicines seemed to have regained some consciousness and were able to speak to her normally. Did you save me? The various life medicines struggled to get up and sit on the ground, but their strength could not be exerted at all. Liu Si patted the shoulder of Zhuming medicine and said, "It's me. Just wake up and relax. You ran too hard just now, and now you don't have much energy." Zhuming Yao arched his hand towards Liu Si and pursed his lips, saying, "Thank you. I saw you walking with me in the cave, avoiding the gravel falling from the top. How did you do it? It's amazing." Liu Si thought for a moment, although she had already savored her entire performance in the cave several times in her heart, she still chose a more humble statement. "I'm just paying more attention to the stone cracks on the top of the cave. Be careful, anyone can do it." "No." The various life medicines were directly denied, as if they wanted to make a long speech, but couldn't lift it in one breath and coughed. On one side are senior brothers and sisters who have annihilated the group, and on the other side is the inexplicable collapse of the Fatian cave. The excitement of escaping death and the discomfort of hunger and stomach collapse are intertwined, almost making the various life medicines breathless. Liu Si saw all the life medicines with tears on their faces, as if they were in an extremely excited mood. She was thinking about the mysterious metal ingot in the package and wanted to take this opportunity to ask for some information, but judging from the appearance of the various life medicines, she probably didn't know any in-depth information. Zhuming medicine gasped for breath and said, I think we can't stay near Fatian cave right now. This cave is already not right, there are many strange things, and we need to leave." She couldn't catch her breath and almost turned her back before fainting. Liu Si twitched at the corner of her mouth and patted the back of the various life medicines thoughtfully. "Ah, forget it, you rest well first. I know you want to say we can't stay here all the time, we need to leave as soon as possible. Let's not talk about anything else for now, sigh." Zhuming medicine pursed his mouth, seeming somewhat embarrassed. After staring foolishly at Liu Si for a while, he suddenly said, My surname is Liu, and my name has a single Si character, which is the Si of the water. My memory seems to be not quite right, and when I woke up, it was inexplicably wonderful and I was in the Fatian cave," Liu Si replied casually. Zhuming medicine took a few deep breaths, as if he was using his energy to regulate his breath, and his speech finally stopped breaking. She nodded solemnly. "My surname is Zhu, my name is Mingyao. I am a disciple of the Shanshui sect. Now that the Fatian cave has collapsed, I don't know how many disciples of cults will come to investigate the situation in the surrounding area. It's really not advisable to stay for a long time, cough." She pointed to the faint path under the gray and white smoke and said, "We need to hurry and leave, not far ahead. There is a treasure passed down from our sect's ancestors that can instantly teleport us back to our sect. Fast transfer. Do you still have this kind of good magic weapon?" Liu Si looked at her in confusion and said, "Do you have the energy to walk now? You don't want me to carry you, do you? I really can't carry you." Zhuming medicine smiled awkwardly and said, "It's okay. I have dry food on my body, which is a special trait. Eating it can temporarily restore some strength." She grunted and tore open a bag of pure vegetarian dry food, and ate it without changing her complexion. Liu Si touched her hand. Name. Zhuming medicine, status. Life in danger. It seems that this dry food is still useful, and the health of the various life medicines has changed from extremely critical to critical. Liu Si twitched the corners of her mouth, her perception of this unpleasant food slightly improved. The road is not far, and the various life medicines wield their large swords on their backs, struggling to split open branches and open the way. Soon, they arrive at a dense forest. The tall and long trunk was like a pile of crowded pillars, squeezing them into a narrow space. The various life medicines reached out to touch the trunk, one tree after another, murmuring words as if searching for something. Wow, a tree seemed to shake, dancing with an unusual rhythm under the palm of the various life medicines. That's it here. The various life medicines exhaled a breath, swiftly wielded their swords, and cut through several thick vines next to the tree roots. Below was a small tree hole, inside which lay a green token. She picked up the token, took Liu Si's hand, and walked to a clearing with relatively loose trees. I've used this token once before, but it's actually okay. Just get used to it. Zhu Mingyao seemed a bit nervous, staring nervously at Liu Si. What does it mean? That is to say, this token was passed down a long time ago, and we are not sure about its principle. Its power is very powerful. Miss Liu, you need to be mentally prepared. Zhu Mingyao showed an ugly smile and suddenly clenched his grip on the token. A diagonal wind blew from the side in an instant, and the air around him seemed to become strange. People's breathing began to drift. Liu Si frowned and said, "Why do I feel so strange?" Zhu Mingyao Dao said, "The first time I used a token, it's like this. Just endure it for a while. Oh, by the way, hold on to your package tightly." Who? Before she could finish speaking, suddenly she felt a strong wind blowing in. Liu Si only saw the mouths of the various life medicines open and closed, as if saying something. The intense sound of the wind tore apart all the voices beneath it. She seemed to have been thrown into a washing machine, her head and body lifted up in one go, wildly swaying in circles, her eyes turning black, as if she was about to faint with just one more shake. What kind of fast garbage transfer is this? It's better to walk honestly. Just a second before she was about to faint, Liu Si regained consciousness due to a nauseous sensation, helplessly enduring the torment of dizziness. How disgusting. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Making, extremely small, wealth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Making, extremely small, wealth. Are you okay, Miss Liu? The sound of the various life medicines came out from afar and was heard in Liu Si's ears, but it seemed like she was carrying a big horn, spreading into strange mid to low tones, roaring in her mind. The dizziness ended, and Liu Si stepped back onto the ground. She took a deep breath of air and tried to suppress the feeling of vomiting, saying, "Cough. Cough, it's okay. What happened to that just now?" "That's nothing, don't worry. Are you better now?" Zhu Mingyao patted Liu Si's back with concern and helped her calm down. "This is Cunning Town. Going up, it's our Shanshui sect." The sound of playfulness gradually came, and Liu Si opened her eyes, and the surrounding scenery changed from blurry to clear. I saw a broad street moving forward, with crowds of people in groups of 3 or 2 pressing down on the street, either strolling or rushing along, constantly flowing in the shape of a river. I didn't expect a small town under this sect to be quite large. Liu Si coughed 2 or 3 more times and squinted her eyes, saying, "Did we use the correct token method just now? Why is it so bumpy?" Zhu Ming Medicine's eyes flickered, and he lowered his head, refusing to answer directly. Instead, he held Liu Si's hand and walked forward, saying, "Let's go back to the sect to rest first." Not far away, there were 2 women dressed in strong attire with a heavy expression, as if they were going to eat people, and they ran towards us seriously, pushing aside the crowd. Ah Zhu! In the blink of an eye, these 2 women had already run to Liu Si, one left and one right, standing steadily like door gods. Zhu Ming Medicine's face changed and he looked at these 2 people with a serious expression on his face. He quickly bowed and said, "It's Senior Sister Wu from Cunning Town. How could she come to find me?" She whispered to Liu Si again, "These 2 are apprentices in charge of the town and have some say in the town. Let's hear what they want first." Liu Si stood on the side with a strange expression on her face and began to observe. The 2 elder martial sisters Wu should be twins. They not only look the same, but also speak in the same tone. Why use tokens? What should we do if something happens in the town? Their speaking attitude is rude, and the various life medicines are obviously very unhappy. She pursed her lips, released Liu Si's hand, held the token in her hand, and said, "It's urgent, I need to quickly go back to the door and report the situation. The token should be used once in a while, and there shouldn't be any major problems, and..." She paused for a moment, suddenly as if she had changed her personality. She straightened her chest and looked up, speaking calmly in tone. "Moreover, the Fatian cave has collapsed. If there were really any problems, it would have happened long ago. It's not the token's turn to carry the blame." Liu Si just realized that there seemed to be an extra token in the hands of the various life medicines. The two tokens were tightly fitted together, giving a rough impression as if they had become thicker. This can make people quickly transmit tokens without knowing how to use them. Listening to their tone, using them seems to cause some side effects, and can only be called in emergency situations. Wu's senior sisters glanced at each other. Fatian cave has collapsed, with huge movements. But that's not a reason for being stubborn either. Do you really want to talk like this? Liu Si looked at them silently. Couldn't it be that their intelligence was only 0? She moved aside, wanting to stay a little further away from these two silly twins. Unexpectedly, these two people immediately pasted on it, as if they had made up their minds to stand straight in front of Liu Si, to block the sunlight for her. "I didn't call you. Don't move." Zhu Mingyao frowned and seemed very dissatisfied with Wu's sister's overbearing attitude. "Senior sister Wu, this is Miss Liu Si. She saved my life in Fatian Cave. It's complicated. If the town leader wants to know about Fatian Cave, I can tell you about it first." She immediately took a step forward and forcefully grasped the wrists of the two senior sisters, saying, "Is the supervisor really there? If he is, please ask him to go up the mountain with me to see my master, and I won't waste time saying one thing twice. Master, he has his own business to attend to. Now let's take over here." Sister Wu stared at her wrist at the same time. Zhu Mingyao looked up and said, "But you two may not be enough. All right, let Mr. Wu come together and discuss the defense of the town gate in the future. You two come with me." Wu's sisters was still stunned and did not respond. Zhu Mingyao suddenly turned around and stuffed 3 silver coins into Liu Si's hand, whispering, "These two people have always been difficult to deal with. I'll take them away first. Miss Liu, please make do with finding a inn to rest for the night. Remember to come to me on the mountain tomorrow. Don't leave the town, it seems like the weather has changed outside, and there are many evil believers wandering around, which is very dangerous." After saying that, she dragged Wu's sister's wrist and forced her forward, and soon the 3 disappeared into the crowd. "I'm the only one left. It seems that the relationship between the Shanshui sect and several officials in Cunning Town is average." Liu Si moaned in her heart and stretched lazily. The sunset is setting in the west, and it is now evening. The tempting aroma of food wafted from the long streets, and long wine flags hung at the doorstep of every shop. Liu Si was dragging her huge package and originally wanted to go into the store to eat something, but now her appearance was really eye-catching, and even someone pointed and laughed at her on the spot. After some thought, she went to the pawn shop first. The pawn shop owner had a friendly appearance and spoke softly. Seeing Liu Si's large package, he gave her a high price of 30 silver coins, which made her change her face on the spot and tearfully accept the money. The price difference with the panel information is too much, isn't it? Alas, actually there weren't many good things in the package originally, and all the craftsmanship was similar. The giant sword was the giant sword, and the wooden longbow was the wooden longbow. The goods on the rotten street were already mentally prepared not to sell for a good price. Just encountering unscrupulous merchants, who can be angry. Even at the current price, it was hard won by her after bargaining and bargaining. If there is no charm attribute to support it, then it has to be a blessing. There are still some torn clothes stained with blood in the package, and no pawnshop owner is willing to accept them. Liu Si couldn't help but complain that the people here didn't know how to be frugal, but they had to endure the pain and throw away these clothes. As for the terrifying names of the black meat pills, she decided to put them aside for now and wait until they were sold on the black market. If she found any powerful effects, she would keep them for her own use, just like the rest of the package. With money, of course you have to spend. Liu Si first purchased a black thick leather belt from a small clothing store. This belt design is somewhat similar to a butterfly belt, with many small pockets and buckles on top. She put the metal ingots into a small square bag and hung the short sword and dagger on both sides of her waist, which looked very imposing. Everything was done, and it was already late. She strolled to the starting street and found the shop that smelled the most fragrant. She happily went in and asked for a table of signature dishes. What are these things? Fried cabbage with green peppers. Braised tofu with chrysanthemum and artemisia. Fried cabbage with old asparagus. Unique flavor. Liu Si propped her head with one hand and gazed lazily at the table full of oil-free vegetables, reluctantly stuffing herself with a dry piece of chicken. It's really disgusting. Do people here have taste problems? Due to the torment of eating, her leisure suddenly arose, and she dug out the scattered books from her shrunken package and began to read them. There is a boring miscellaneous book here, a broken book that is completely rotten and cannot be read, and 3 martial arts books. After all this tinkering, she actually learned a lot of information. For example, the fighting classics here are divided into 3 types, namely warrior, xiashi, and fangshi, corresponding to strength, agility and intelligence. Rain and dew are equal to garbage, so she simply added the upgraded 3 attribute points to agility. And these books, at first she thought they were all read by alchemists using magic, but in fact, they were not. The Rong Tu Shenju is a magic book, which is equivalent to magic or immortality, and the alchemist is specialized in magic. The long sword teaches soldiers how to wield their long swords, and the half flying and fluttering is a martial arts tutorial. All of these are collectively referred to as martial arts books. These techniques are collectively referred to as abilities in her built.in system. Isn't this similar to those RPG game systems? Liu Si stirred her chopsticks and, amidst the withered cabbage and boring books, resolutely became a good child, finishing the Rongtu Shinjue at lightning speed. It says learning requires intelligence 3, but I still finished reading and learned it. Liu Si stared at the words Rongtu Ju following his ability column on the panel, and couldn't help but feel scared. Is it her innate talent that allows her to learn spells beyond the numerical limits given by the system, or is it that the attributes given to her by the system do not include her own intelligence, but overall, she has reached the target requirement point? Melt the soil under your feet into mud and water, creating a void. It's like creating a trap. This is for killing and burying corpses, right? Said Liu Si in detail. She thought anxiously, wishing she could make a big hole in her feet right now, pour all the food into the hole, and the only bit of needle-like appetite for the table full of junk food would disappear in an instant. Liu Si immediately bought the order and hurriedly walked towards the town gate, preparing to find a slightly secluded place outside the town to conduct an experiment. By the spacious town gate, there were only 2 guards yawning, each guarding a dim lamp, staring blankly. The door did not fully close. Liu Si ignored these 2 guards and walked straight outside the door. Suddenly, he heard 2 scoldings coming from outside the door, one after another, with a consistent tone. You're here. What are you doing? Liu Si walked out of the door and saw Senior Sister Wu standing not far away, with her head raised and chest raised. In a familiar posture. Although the sunset came at night, they maintained the solemn and stern demeanor of a gatekeeper, guarding the town gate, looking much more dedicated than those 2 guards. What's up? Liu Si raised his spirits and smiled at the twin sisters with great interest. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Everyone is smart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Everyone is smart at night, in front of the town gate. Liu Si looked to the left and saw Senior Sister Wu holding a steel whip, with angry eyes and eyebrows. Liu Si looked to the right, and it was still Senior Sister Wu, holding a steel whip and glaring angrily. Everywhere is Senior Sister Wu. The two senior sisters Wu walked horizontally, as if using some strange footwork, their figures constantly overlapping and swaying. Liu Si's people were dizzy. Two people who looked exactly like each other went beyond the effect of mirror shadow, and the twins were overbearing. Despite this, she still maintained her demeanor and politely greeted. "Good evening, senior sisters. It's getting late, you inexplicably left town. There's chaos outside, what do you want to do?" Wu's senior sisters sneered as their figures continued to sway. Liu Si quietly rolled her eyes, turned her back and grabbed the handle of the short sword on her belt, but the person said. "What are you talking about? I'm just looking for the way to Shanshui sect. Can't I go?" The two sisters stayed here and didn't know whether they were guarding her or just happened to meet her. After thinking for a moment, Liu Si decided to first test the power of her charm attribute and see if she could persuade these two foolish twins to let go of their hostility. Looking for a way. Are you going up the mountain to find people from the Shanshui sect? However, the mountain road to the Shanshui sect is not this way. Wu's senior sisters said with a surprised expression on their faces. There is a play. The shocked expression on Liu Si's face seemed even more exaggerated than that of Wu's senior sisters. Isn't this the way? Well, how can we go up the mountain without leaving town? So you don't know how to get there. Just go up the mountain from the other side of town. Wu's senior sisters suddenly realized and finally stopped their back and forth swaying gait, speaking seriously. We are working outside the town and met you here. I thought you were a cult and wanted to fish in troubled waters. They seemed to have let go of their guard and roughly pointed Liu Si in the direction of the mountain gate, then slowly left towards the woods by the roadside. Persuasion successful. Gain experience points. As Wu's senior sisters softened their attitude, a line of prompt words automatically burst out of Liu Si's eyes. It seems that persuasion and other behaviors can also gain experience points, which is quite humanized. It's just that there is no specific value for the convincing experience value. Liu Si was extremely depressed and didn't want to miss this great opportunity to conduct the experiment. Regardless of the situation, she quickly grabbed one of the senior sisters Wu's arms and loudly said, "Then I'll go back to town now. It's okay to go up the mountain." In an instant, a string of information spread out before Liu Si's eyes. Name. Wu Tsueshui, level 6, status. Normal health. Oh my goodness, she's only one level higher than her. This time, it was Liu Si's turn to let go of her guard. She looked sympathetically at the two senior sisters Wu, shaking her head in her heart. She still carries a martial arts book called Divine Shadow Step with her, which may be the step tutorial she just used. It's really thoughtful. She needs to try to trick this book into coming over. Time recovery. Two senior sisters Wu looked at each other and said in confusion. What does it mean to have a problem going up the mountain? Can you speak more clearly? Liu Si said to herself, there's a problem with going up the mountain. My memory of the mountain is very vague. What does the mountain look like? Is it very high? I don't know how to walk up it. How did you get up the mountain? Of course, it's just going straight up. The Shanshui Zone road is well built. What does walking mean? Walking with legs. Wu's senior sisters looked at Liu Si incredulously, and Liu Si also widened her eyes to look at them. Can't you walk? You just walk step by step. Of course I can walk, but I have only walked on flat ground. Since the mountains are high, there should be slopes, and places with slopes are different from flat ground. How can you be sure that climbing and walking are the same? I haven't walked on places with slopes, and I can't imagine a specific scene. What if I walk and fall vertically? Wu's senior sisters remained silent for a while and clenched their fists. Sister, she's a fool. Sister, I can see it too. Yes, my intelligence is only 0. Upon hearing these words, Liu Si even nodded. Can you help me? It should be Wu Zuishui, the younger sister, hesitated for a moment and said, well, Shanshui's sect is also familiar with us. We will take you up the mountain once, and you can watch us go. I didn't expect that she could force these twins to speak normally. It seems that someone still needs to be at the bottom of the line for these people to speak up. Liu Si looked aggrieved and laughed heartily. I saw you walking so hard just now, swaying back and forth. I can't even see your feet clearly. Can I really keep up with you when you go up the mountain? Wu Zuishui was stunned and disgusted with his sister. I think what she said makes sense. She looks so foolish, I'm sure she will really fall on the mountain road. Sister seemed to want to say something, but Liu Si interjected forcefully, if there were any walking tips or secrets, that would be great. I could barely keep up with you walking too. Yes, there is. Wu Zuishui reached out to his pocket and cast a questioning look at Sister Wu. Sister Wu nodded and said, the first few pages. Wu Zuishui immediately followed suit and said, it doesn't matter if you read it. She took out a booklet and handed it to Liu Si. This is the martial arts book of the Divine Shadow Step. You should be able to understand some of it. Once you understand, just go up the mountain casually. You idiot, being able to understand the basics of the first few pages already benefits you a lot. Liu Si understood what they said. Wu's sisters should not want to continue to tangle with her on such silly topics, just like giving candy to a child, and taking out the martial arts book to coax her to listen. Anyway, it can be considered that one's own charm attribute has played a role, although this effect may not be as eye-catching as intelligence attribute. Liu Si immediately cooperated with their kindness, showing a silly smile, and ran to the dim lantern light at the town gate to quickly read. The 2 guards were hanging their heads bit by bit, looking asleep. Liu Si exerted all her previous skills in reading novels, with her eyes sweeping left and right and her fingers matching to quickly flip through the pages. In no time, she quickly finished flipping through this thin booklet. Name. Liu Si. Ability. Earth Melting Technique. Divine Shadow Step. It's really simple. Like the Roam to Divine Technique, the Divine Shadow Step Technique book also contains obscure and difficult to understand mnemonics. Liu Si knows every word, but she doesn't even understand what it means when connected. However, this doesn't prevent her from thoroughly flipping through the book and learning the technique. Is this also considered a cheat brought by the built.in system? After all, learning things in games is something that can be done easily, and Liu Si's approach is not an exaggeration. Liu Si grinned at Wu's sisters under the light and shook the pamphlet in his hand. He was really a good-looking fool. The expression of Wu's sisters was not so bright. Sister, I feel like something's wrong. Sister, I also feel like it's not quite right. They exchanged a glance. Even fools can read. Wu Zuishui immediately reverted back to his original haughty expression, lifted his head, and said coldly to Liu Si as he walked back, do you recognize characters? Can you understand what's written on it? Liu Si opened her mouth and said, I don't know. I casually flipped through it, but I feel much more at ease. Oh. Sister Wu nodded and retrieved the martial arts book, but suddenly froze there and said suspiciously, no, Zhu talked about you before. A skeptical expression continued to spread to Wu Zuishui's face. She said, you have a great speech and a friendly personality. The word count is too high, I can't speak symmetrically with my sister. Liu Si looked at Wu Zuishui's instantly stiff expression and almost burst into laughter. She forced her face away and said, oh, yes. Am I not good at speaking now? But you can understand the map of Fatian Cave. There should be characters on the map inside Phaeton Cave. The suspicion on Wu's sister's face became deeper and deeper, and her eyes became more unfriendly. Those words are commonly used words. I have forgotten the words in your martial arts book. Do we have to talk about such trivial matters? Liu Si couldn't help but complain a few words about the various life medicines in her heart. Seeing the coldness on Wu's sister's face, I knew that her charm attribute was not good enough to persuade them. What should I do? Liu Si smiled helplessly, her legs suddenly tightened, she accelerated forward, and suddenly ran towards the outskirts of the town in one go, divine shadow step. She used martial arts for the first time in her life and successfully used them. Did she take the shadow step? This is completely impossible. The sisters of the Wu family were shocked. All the words in the skill book are hard to understand. It takes a lot of time to learn to use the skill. They also took several years to fully master it, and now Liu Si has only seen it for a short while, but has been able to successfully learn the divine shadow step and use it fluently. This is simply unbelievable. Chase. Sister Wu gave the order in a concise manner. The three of them immediately used the same footwork and frequency, as if practicing, chasing each other in a straight line in the suburbs. However, Wu's sisters have a better grasp of footwork, and their level is one level higher than Liu Si. In no time, Sister Wu came behind Liu Si with just one arm's throw, as if she could grab the pillar of her collar a little further forward. Don't chase me. Liu Si didn't want to run away and get rid of them, and even had some leisure time to look back at the situation. You are indeed a scammer and villain. I'm going to catch you and take action. Liu Si listened to the excited cry of Wu's sisters, and his mouth twitched twice. Is there any misunderstanding between us? What's the misunderstanding? Stop it for me. Wu Tsueshui drank in a fierce voice, but Liu Si suddenly passed through the dense trees by the roadside, her figure disappearing into the dim shadows of the grass and trees, not truly visible. The moonlight was still shining, and my sister continued to give orders. Go in. Chase. Wu Tsueshui nodded and said, It's good. Susu, she stepped straight into a patch of tall grass, only to hear a strange noise coming from ahead. Her sister rushed forward, and just as she wanted to keep up, she heard a strange movement coming from the right side as well. We have two people, don't try to talk around, said the older sister loudly. Don't try to make a fuss, we have two people. Wu Tsueshui nodded, repeated it, and turned to walk towards the place on the right where the strange noise was making. Under the soft moonlight, I saw the big tree over there trembling, and the dense weeds seemed to shake for a moment. Dong. Wu Tsueshui lowered his head to look, but saw a rough stone falling in the middle of the grass, with a cut-off branch pressing underneath. She suddenly turned her head and said, No. Puzzle. The dagger penetrated into her heart from behind, and with a gentle twist of the sharp blade, Wu Tsueshui's body had lost all its vitality before he could finish speaking. Ah. Her words turned into a painful sigh, and Liu Si covered her mouth, propped up a dagger, and pulled her down to the edge of the tree trunk. Solved 1. Blood splattered on the tree trunk, dripping down the rough texture. Liu Si pulled out his dagger and was about to sneak to the other side of the big tree trunk when he heard a cold laugh coming from in front of him. You killed my sister. The sister and the twins held a steel whip in her hand, glaring angrily. This time, she was the only one. Wow. She moved her gait and swayed her body. Suddenly, she leaned forward and grabbed Liu Si's ankle. I will slowly, piece by piece, kill you, and report to my sister for eating, vomiting. Name. Wu Jianzhu, level 8, status. Normal health. Is this world being so ruthless even for the righteous? Liu Si looked at this level 8 and decided that he could not take it for granted. He thought that the accomplishments of twins should be exactly the same. She didn't think much about how much her behavior of deceiving martial arts and killing people looked like a bad person. She just smiled at Wu Jianzhu. the experiment continues. Revise the order of expression in the previous chapter to make the logic smoother. The end of this chapter. Chapter 9. Experts do need to leave some space. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Experts do need to leave some space, sister, I am your sister. I have taken it from this fool. Under the soft moonlight, a pool of blood appeared among the trees. Liu Si sat next to Wu Zuishui's body, although her ankle was held by Wu Jianzhu, her expression was still very serious and upright. Her gaze kept fixed on the corner, and the prompt to obtain experience points remained unanswered for a long time, seemingly unconvinced. The new statement did not receive recognition from Wu Jianzhu. Sure enough, Wu Jianzhu sneered, do you think I'm also a fool? What does it mean? If intelligence is 0, then it must be foolish. Isn't that still negative? Liu Si pouted discontentedly and casually said, I'm really your sister. Although Wu Jianzhu has a higher level than her, she was also deceived by her silly appearance before. It seems that the success of persuasion is not related to her level, but only to her own charm and reasonable language. Just like now, Wu Jianzhu didn't seem to be moved by her words at all. Don't fart to me. I'm not talking nonsense. Liu Si squinted her eyes as she watched Wu Jianzhu's movements, but saw a fierce expression on her face. The arm holding the steel whip moved slightly, and her wrist twirled vigorously, as if she was about to strike. Wow! But the sound of the whip breaking through the air stretched infinitely, forming a strange bass. Liu Si quickly opened the panel to determine the time of the bullet, observing the angle of the steel whip in mid-air, and figuring out which angle to avoid better. She stared at the seemingly heavy steel whip, her eyes shining brightly, determined to twist her upper body and roll towards the ground next to her. Wow! I saw the dust flying fiercely, and the newly formed grass seed splashing everywhere. The steel whip swung straight down in mid-air, hitting the ground with a heavy sword-like force, but did not harm Liu Si. Sister, why don't you just use your killing moves? Don't procrastinate like this, give me some pleasure. I don't want to stay in this person's body, I just want to be myself. Liu Si is dedicated and authentic while hiding. You. Wu Jianzhu was furious, and his hand, which was pressing against Liu Si's ankle, exerted some more force. He snorted and lifted the whip, as if flying with a machete, swinging it down heavily once again. Wow! Liu Si calmly opened the panel. The steel whip is heavy and should be a weapon used by warriors. Just now, Wu Jianzhu's divine shadow step was so good. I think her agility should be quite high, and her level is not much higher than herself. This indicates that the strength attribute of Wu Jianzhu is definitely not high, so the use of the steel whip must be very poor. Wow! Sure enough, Liu Si just rolled aside casually, but the steel whip clumsily landed 10 centimeters away from her head. Except for splashing some soil onto her face, there was no other impact. In short, if Wu Jianzhu has high strength, he cannot control Liu Si's ankle in one go, and if he is agile, he cannot use the steel whip in his hand well. Fighting and having to analyze with your brain is really tiring. Liu Si looked at Wu Jianzhu with a burning gaze and continued to coax her, saying, Besides me, who else can have telepathy with you and evade your whip so tacitly, sister? Wu Jianzhu looked silently at Liu Si, not sure if the 2 empty swings just now had hurt her confidence. Liu Si's words made her feel better, and she didn't answer for a moment. Is this okay too? Let me go, sister. My ankle hurts so much, Liu Si said again and again. Wu Jianzhu said quietly, Are you cutting water? Yes. If I find out something is wrong, you will die even worse. If what I said is wrong, let me die. Liu Si stared blankly at Wu Jianzhu, who was also staring at her intently. Wu Jianzhu slowly released his fingers and stood up backwards. Liu Si let out a breath, moved her swollen and red ankles, propped her hands on the ground, and also wanted to sit up. Suddenly, Wu Jianzhu suddenly pulled out a brand new and shiny dagger from behind, and fiercely stabbed Liu Si's chest in the moonlight. Go to hell, if you still want to cut water, I want you to shred the body. It's too scary. However, Liu Si had also pulled out his belt and short sword, crossing the blade and holding on to Wu Jianzhu's dagger. She had already seen this dagger in Wu Jianzhu's equipment rack and was prepared for this sudden attack. Shine! But seeing the short sword tremble and slide down the dagger, Liu Si's strength was not as strong as Wu Jianzhu's, and he couldn't hold it for long. Watching Wu Jianzhu grip the dagger with even greater force, the sharp blade of the dagger was about to pull open the short sword and stab Liu Si's chest. However, Liu Si opened the information panel and forcefully entered the bullet time. After thinking for a moment, she suddenly lifted her intact toe and quickly kicked towards the inside of Wu Jianzhu's calf. This is really cheating. Pause starts pausing, it's completely semi-instant. Liu Si smiled at the dagger in front of her, and the expression on Wu Jianzhu's face reflected on the dagger suddenly changed. The weight on her body indeed lightened instantly, and she took the opportunity to slide to the side. You have strong adaptability. Wu Jianzhu covered her calves with a gloomy expression. Thank you. Liu Si is polite and down to earth. She took a divine shadow step, swayed to the left, and before Wu Jianzhu could react, she approached her. Lift the left hand forward, and the short sword fly diagonally upwards, pulling towards Wu Jianzhu's neck. Wu Jianzhu's body quickly thrust upwards, and his breastplate bounced open, only allowing Liu Si's short sword to pierce a hole. His long hand swung forcefully inward, and the dagger plunged heavily into Liu Si's chest. Shit! The dagger pierced through the air and screamed endlessly, causing Liu Si to feel a continuous stabbing pain in her chest. The blood droplets flying out looked like a necklace in bullet mode. 3 levels higher, there is still a slight gap between directly challenging and challenging. Sigh. She sighed in her heart, opened the panel, and switched to a special skill, Backwater 3 Battles. Requirement. Agile 5 Perception 1. My friend, why are you about to die? This is too careless. Fortunately, there is also this skill to keep you safe. Take it, each time your health drops below 10%, your attack speed increases by 20%. I hope you can cheer up and attack more to vent your frustration before the enemy completely tears your body apart, so experts will keep some, just stay in emergency situations and adapt accordingly. Successfully learned skills, Liu Si quickly turned her wrist, and the short sword skillfully swung at an unexpected speed, precisely following the loophole in Wu Jianzhu's chest armor that had previously been pierced, fiercely piercing through flesh and blood. Shit! Liu Si used all her strength to grip the handle of the sword and plunged the short sword into Wu Jianzhu's chest, causing blood to surge out and staining her hand red. Wu Jianzhu struggled to pierce the dagger deeper in his hand, but was grabbed by Liu Si's other hand at the wrist and twisted it down. Ah! The short sword is long, the dagger is short. Wu Jianzhu's eyes glared angrily, his heart and lungs were shattered, and he vomited his last bite of blood and fell to the ground. Do upgrade. Obtain attribute point 1 and special skill point 1. It hurts so much. Having dealt with the crisis, Liu Si felt a surge of excitement in her heart. She squinted her eyes and looked at the dagger on her chest, neither pulling it out nor not pulling it out. Taking a deep breath, she first pulled out the short sword that was inserted into Wu Jianzhu's chest. While the blood was not yet solidified, she groped and took out a metal ingot from her waist bag, throwing it into the blood. I'm too busy. Hiss. The blood shed by Wu's sisters was soon sucked clean by the metal ingot, leaving only a shallow layer of dirt on the ground. Chest pain made it almost difficult to breathe, but fortunately Wu Jianzhu only held a short dagger, and the wound should not have penetrated deep into his lungs. Open the panel, and your health is only extremely critical. As Liu Si watched the metal ingot absorb blood, her mood couldn't help but brighten up and she relaxed all over. She took out some dry food and stuffed it into her mouth. Anyway, it's better to regain some health first. In Liu Si's eyes, the metal ingot didn't know if it was wearing a filter. After absorbing enough blood, it shone under the moonlight as if it was also emitting light outward. She first ate dry food until her health was restored to critical, and then picked up the metal ingot to observe carefully. The originally dark surface now seemed to have a faint dark red pattern, which seemed to be a false destiny. What does this fake destiny mean? Liu Si stood up and continued to stuff dry food while pulling out a dagger from his chest. Suddenly, he sprayed some fresh blood onto the ground. She pursed her lips and had no intention of feeding the strange metal ingot with her own blood. She simply took it back into her waist pocket. It's time to work. She has found all the things on Wu's sisters' body, but she dare not wear their clothes back to the town, and the steel whip cannot be sold casually, so she can only bear the pain. As for the ordinary dagger that couldn't identify her identity, she naturally put it in the package and prepared to use it for monetization. There are also 2 notes, the contents of which are exactly the same. It seems that they were written by people of the Mountain and Water sect. Liu Si has a rough look. I have received news from senior brother Lon of our sect, and it seems that he has really been influenced by the cult and defected. Now that he says he's coming back, he's probably carrying some kind of conspiracy. I hope Mr. Wu can do a good job in protecting the outside of the town, monitoring and alerting. She pursed her lips and threw the note aside. Now, dig 2 holes to bury these 2 sisters. She has not yet used the Roam to Divine technique, which happens to be a technique for digging holes. Perhaps it is used by bad people to kill and bury pits. Thinking of how brave her divine shadow step was just now, Liu Si couldn't help but rub her hands and was eager to give it a try. No need for mnemonics, no need to pinch hands, she just needs to move her heart and can automatically perform the technique, Roam to, Puff. Suddenly, but with a sense of darkness before her eyes, Liu Si felt as if her body had been lifted from the inside out, and her internal organs began to ache violently. She was only halfway through her technique when she lost her strength and couldn't control herself from lying on the ground. She vomited a mouthful of blood in her mouth, and her head was painful and dizzy. Bomb! What's going on? Inexplicably wonderful, she's about to die now. Halfway through the night, Liu Si suddenly felt a strange burning sensation in her waist, and a stream of heat slowly flowed through her meridians, easing the pain on her body. She struggled to open her waist bag, took out the suddenly hot metal ingot, squinted her eyes, and looked vaguely at it. The originally twisted, false destiny character with the dark pattern on it has become empty. Sigh. Liu Si had a guess in her heart and opened her own panel. Name: Liu Si. Status: a dying person. The metal ingot should have helped her block her deadly damage once, so the false life on it became empty. She didn't take any notice, and the metal ingot is at least a very powerful magic weapon. After making a judgment, her gaze at the metal ingot also changed. Now I only have 1 breath, a drop of blood. Liu Si tugged at the corner of her mouth, twisted her body, and slowly took out a mouthful of dry food to put into her mouth. Because she couldn't chew it, she could only swallow it slowly. She barely regained her spirits for a while, determined to find the cause of the sudden situation just now. Open the description of the Roam to Divine technique, and the panel description states that learning requires an intelligence of 3, open the Divine Shadow step, which states the learning requirement of agility 3. This is a requirement that has not been met. Forceful casting has been backfired, right? Liu Si twitched her lips. If it weren't for the metal ingot just now, she would have really wasted half a day's effort. She killed 2 people, but died for a foolish reason. If that's the case, she said her intelligence of 0 is just a numerical value, not the actual level, but no one really believes it. Although it's not much better now, is it? Liu Si half covered her face. Fortunately there was no one around to watch. Killing someone is one thing, losing face is another. She slowly ate the dry food until she couldn't swallow any more. Thinking of the strange and foul smell of the dry food made her vomit. She stood up and moved her limbs. Life state. Critically ill, she honestly dug a hole by hand and buried the Wu sisters. Her clothes were rotten. She had to put on Wu Xiaoshui's clothes first and turn the side of the clothes with less blood into a cloak to block her body. Then she walked back to the original way. The sky is still dark, and night continues to envelop the earth. The two guards were completely asleep and didn't notice Liu Si's return. It's okay. Liu Si's eyes flashed and thought for a moment. First, according to the small map he had drawn when shopping, he went to a snack bar that was open all night and bought 3 meat-stuffed buns, 2 hot deep-fried dough sticks, and a cup of hot soybean milk. She deliberately poured soybean milk on her cloak, asked the shopkeeper to buy a plain dress and put it on, and then slowly walked back to the town gate. The aroma of food is like a hook in the dark, awakening the two guards. Good evening, big brothers. Can we leave town now? Sure. Because under the Shanshui sect, our town does not have a curfew, making it convenient for those people to enter and exit freely. Okay, thank you very much. Liu Si held the steamed stuffed buns wrapped in oil paper and hesitated to stop at the door. Suddenly he said, "Two brothers, there shouldn't be any wild wolves or dogs in the suburbs ahead." A guard waved his hand and said, "This is your first time coming to us. It's not dangerous, but it's better to be careful. Look at the big night, no one goes out and strolls like you do." The other guard nodded in agreement and said, "However, it seems that there are some cultists outside recently. You should be careful." The routine was successful. It seemed that the two people were really dizzy in front of them, and they didn't notice her and Wu's sisters as little news. Liu Si smiled and was very happy. He divided 2 steamed buns and deep-fried dough sticks and handed them to the guard brother. He only looked outside the town gate and returned to the town as a coward. She found an inn and calmly ordered an upper room, but fell asleep like she had fainted. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Entanglement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Entanglement, Name. Liu Si, Level 6, Status. Normal health. Early in the morning, Liu Si felt refreshed. As she guessed, just like in a game, as long as you have a good sleep, the system will kindly restore your health to its optimal state. Unfortunately, I didn't receive another mental boost. Liu Si happily opened her panel and looked for a full minute before going downstairs to have breakfast. It's still early in the morning, but the first floor of the inn is filled with all kinds of customers. It seems that the restaurant has a decent taste, which is why so many people came to have breakfast. Liu Si casually ordered a bowl of snow vegetable noodles and asked the waiter, "I'm planning to go to Shanshui sect this afternoon. Do you know which way to go? Kill Wu's sisters. It's more suspicious if she runs away directly. Now she should go to Shanshui sect calmly. When things happen, she can also take rhythm." The shopkeeper replied with a smile, "There is an open space behind the town. Follow the steps there and you will find the Shanshui sect. However, there are levels blocking them on the mountain, and only those who are invited to go up can pass. Ordinary people go there for nothing." Liu Si smiled and said, "I was invited up by someone, but I'm still a bit nervous. People from the Shanshui sect should be pretty good, right?" The shopkeeper nodded and said, "That's right. They are all good people. When bad people come to the town, they help to repel them. They just keep a cold face and don't care much about people on weekdays. Moreover, since their sect leader died unexpectedly 20 years ago, they have become even less fond of going down the mountain, and we ordinary townspeople don't see them much. It sounds that the waiter likes the people of Shanshui sect very much, which is quite different from the attitude of Wu's sisters." Liu Si suddenly smiled and asked, "Compared to the head of the town, who is more powerful in the Shanshui sect. Which side do you prefer? The shopkeeper was taken aback for a moment. Obviously, he didn't expect Liu Si to ask such a confusing question. He scratched his head and said, well, that's still from the Shanshui sect. Although the head is very good and strong, his disciples are all too fierce, and... He suddenly lowered his volume and nervously said. And his strength is not very impressive. That's true. The noodles are cooked fairly well, although the toppings are a bit bland and the soup base is a bit tasteless. Compared to those disgusting and sticky pure vegetarian dry foods, it can already be considered a delicious dish. After Liu Si had eaten her fill, she leisurely strolled around the town. Early in the morning, everyone had a hint of anger on their faces and hurried around. She deliberately picked the largest and busiest pawn shop in the house, sold the dagger she brought yesterday for a stinky price, and for that little money, she also picked and bought a cheap and flashy piece of clothing. Anyway, a delicate appearance always makes people feel good about themselves, and everything they do is pleasing to the eye. In simple terms, being good-looking is doing whatever they want. Liu Si made herself behave like a human. As she passed by a small pond in the town, she deliberately lowered her head and glanced at her. She saw a bright-eyed and white-toothed girl also looking at her in the lake, with a smile on her face, making her feel familiar. She returned to the inn with satisfaction. Close the window, close the door. Liu Si took out the metal ingot from her waist bag and instinctively looked up. But seeing the deep red dark lines flowing slowly, Liu Si squinted and observed the surface of the metal ingot, only to find that the word empty on it had once again changed back to false life. Did the replace death that was used yesterday automatically reply? It seems that the chance to replace death is restored by the number of days, and has nothing to do with bloodsucking or killing. That's good too. Killing is really tiring. If we could have successfully convinced the twins last night, there wouldn't have been as much trouble afterwards. Unfortunately, the experience points gained from persuasion shouldn't be as much as killing. Liu Si stretched lazily, pondering whether to buy some chicken blood and duck blood to reward the metal ingots. However, it shouldn't be too late today, and she couldn't find a meat market in the town. The people here are quite strange, with only one dish containing meat among the 10 dishes, just like the dry grains of the Shanshui sect are all pure vegetarian, making it speechless. Liu Si sighed and tidied up her package, heading towards the strange Shanshui sect. New Malaysia's path recognition. Learned requirement. None. Why is this map so small that it drifts away when the wind blows? Don't be nervous, with this skill, you can directly display the map you have only seen in front of you in the panel. When you get lost and circle around, can you just pretend to take a glance at this simple and useless map and deceive yourself, gaining a full sense of peace of mind? Blood bar detective. Requirement. Perception 1. This skill is really useful as it can directly convert the enemy's health points into numbers. Wow, it's so clear at a glance. Do you see this requirement that is as low as its limit? Just perceive 1. Yes, come and learn this skill quickly. It's really amazing. That's amazing. Liu Si read it eerily, but couldn't click on this learning skill. No peeping. Requirement. Perception 10. My friend, you are really a dark ghost. Peeping at someone else's equipment rack and status can no longer satisfy your greedy black heart. Okay, take this skill and enjoy peeking at other people's attributes and abilities. Encountering you is also considered unlucky for the other side. I want to learn this. Liu Si looked at this skill repeatedly, flipping it over and over again. This perception of 10 is too glaring, almost making her vomit. Why is this system so arbitrary? Since such essential skills require a high learning demand for beginners, it doesn't pay attention to balance at all. She sighed and opened her panel. Attributes. Strength 0, Agility 5, Perception 1, Endurance 0, Lucky 2, Charm 6, Intelligence 0, Retention Point 1, Psi. In these 2 days of wandering, she has only seen Wang Danqian, a high-level person. She guessed that Wang Danxian's cultivation was appropriate, with a significant increase in agility and a corresponding increase in level. Even the most crafty merchant in the town is no better than Zhu Ming Medicine and Wu Sisters. This indicates that universal attributes such as luck and charm are very precious, and cannot be increased like strength, agility, and intelligence through intense training. With this in mind, Liu Si didn't want to increase her strength, agility, intelligence at all. Her charm and luck were both universal and noble, making her look cost-effective. Especially charm, even if ordinary people wear a fashionable new outfit, it can only add a little bit. But Liu Si can add infinite charm through the system, as long as her charm is high enough. Even if she wears rags and emits a sour smell all over her body, it may seem like a sweet cake in the eyes of others. When the time comes, her charm and luck endurance will be high, and she will be like the protagonist of a bad street novel. Her mouth will be filled with heartbreaking preaching, deceiving people to death and risking their lives. She will lie at home waiting for external cheats to hit her, carrying packages even taller than humans, containing all the treasures she has picked up. Isn't it more comfortable than being bloody every day? Sigh. Liu Si sighed again, but added the points she had just obtained from yesterday's upgrade to her perception. She thought for a moment and thought again. Although these days are enjoyable, people still need some excitement, especially now that she is wearing a game system. She really needs to taste the feeling of being invincible in the world. Suddenly, her eyes lit up, and the scent in the air became richer. Under the warm sunlight, the petals and green leaves became more vibrant, and with the softer wind, they slowly drifted by her side. I only added a little bit, and the effect is so good. Sigh, although it may be because my body used to stay up late too late, I'm not used to it now when I feel a little better. Liu Si stretched lazily. The air on the mountain was good, and the fragrance of grass and trees made her feel a bit light and drowsy. Unfortunately, a cold reprimand suddenly came from ahead, interrupting her comfortable state. Who are you? Liu Si looked ahead, but saw a small checkpoint placed on the mountain road ahead, in a sparse wooden post. A young man of about 18 glared at her angrily, holding the sword handle and trying to make a dignified appearance. Is this angry eyes a unique skill in your cunning town plot? I didn't feel any strength in the fight. Liu Si was speechless in her heart, but a brilliant smile appeared on her face. Hello. End of this chapter.